Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Try as I might, I have tried so hard to, convince myself that buying an EV is a good thing, or that I want to do it. Having said that, not really, because I have no use for a car. Where I live, Melbourne's got great public transport, and I'm sort of in the city anyway, so it doesn't really bother me too much. But we've spoken about EVs before, Steve, and it's just I've got this first story just to pluck out that the idea that that sales of hybrids are rapidly outstripping those of EVs in Australia. I'm not sure what it's like elsewhere, but I just found that interesting in that, they did have that, so hybrids had that push when they first came out that this was going to be what gets us off of, the standard car running petrol. And that kind of went away. And if this thing indicates anything to me, this particular story, it's that people aren't trusting EVs 100%, because if they were, they wouldn't necessarily go with the hybrid, which that probably makes them feel like that they're contributing to the cause of advancing in terms of some sort of renewable or greener type of transportation, private transportation, and but they still have the comfort of knowing that the internal combustion engine is still there in the event that the battery doesn't cut it.
Oh, Ben, I think one thing that our listeners might not appreciate is that you're actually a car lover. You mightn't have had a car for 10 years, but I know that you love and you know cars. So I think we're together on this one. But I think it goes further than purely the EV range anxiety. EVs now, have larger ranges, and, we're probably in the second generation of EVs now, technically, too, after a decade of producing them. But I think the reality is that people talk. I've got an EV, they will say, and then suddenly there's a whole lot of discussion around all the things that aren't so great about EVs. And it's not the driving necessarily or the range necessarily. It can be build quality, it can be software issues, and it can be the fact that driving an EV is a pretty soulless experience if you are a car lover. Hybrids, on the other hand, are fantastic. They lower our fuel consumption and they drive like regular cars with a whole range of advantages. So they're two very different vehicles. The traditional, even with a hybrid, is the more traditional experience where you buy the vehicle and you own the vehicle. An EV, typically, you might own the vehicle, but the manufacturer still owns the firmware and the software that you're using to interface with the vehicle. And I think all of us have experienced this with mobile phones. It's not always to your liking.
And I guess wrapped up in that is we don't know what the long-term consequences are of ownership of an EV, and where do we end up, 5, 10, 15 years down the track when, I'm humble enough to remember my very first car that I drove, and it was already, as I recall, 30 years old at the time when I actually started driving it, and I was still able to get another 5 years out of it. I just can't see an EV getting there, not without understanding some sort of roadmap for how you would swap out the batteries, and that not being an impost on the environment.
Oh, I think you're right. In Australia, and this is very different to other car markets around the world, but in Australia, typically a 10-year-old car still retains significant value on the second-hand car market. So the idea of trading in a 10-year car and getting something more recent or new is something that still happens in Australia. And there's been a whole host of reasons historically for that. But an EV, the battery life is 10 years, but I don't know who would spend the money on a new battery for their EV, or who would purchase an EV at 8 or 9 years of life. It just seems to me to be quite an interesting proposition, and one we've never had to deal with in Australia before.
Absolutely. Well, I guess something will have to be solved at some point. Obviously, there's the need to get off of cars using fossil fuels, but maybe we're a couple of generations before we will actually see the final version of whatever that happens to be, that replacement.
Well, I agree, and as I said to you before, I think EVs at the moment are probably the DVD of the car world, and will there'll be some generation of EVs in the future that'll be quite different to the ones today.
Just like we stream all of our entertainment now. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Alrighty, let's move on to our second topic. And the Olympics are coming up in a couple of weeks. I lose track of time. I thought we just watched the last lot, and it was already 3 years ago because of COVID. It was delayed a year in Japan, but it's coming up in Paris in a couple of weeks, which will be interesting. And I just had a chuckle at this idea that obviously there's always technology employed to try and help athletes, and this idea of a rocket suit with NASA tech helping Olympic swimmers win gold. The only reason this kind of jumped out at me was that you would imagine that there would be a lot of work, trying to, optimize the swimwear of the athletes to maximize speed, efficiency, countering the drag in the water and all that sort of stuff. But I guess the natural question to ask is that if you're trying to do like an honest competition to try and get like a proper baseline of how a human can do their best in these situations, where's the line with is it helping so much that it's actually not really a genuine reflection of the ability of the athlete?
Well, yeah, it's we ask these questions, and of course there are the running shoes with the extra rebound in them that can give you an extra few seconds per kilometer, which doesn't sound like much, but if you're trying to run a world record time over 5 or 10 kilometers, that's can be a fair advantage. And we've seen this before with the Speedo laser suit, which the Australian swimmers wore and was banned, for these reasons. It's a tricky area, and it's one that you have to wonder about. I guess what you're saying there, Ben, is that there has to be a level playing field. And I think what a lot of these manufacturers do is they use these as an opportunity to market their product. And even if they get banned at the Olympics, it's no big deal. Everyone knows that, you'll swim your 100 meters half a second faster if you're an elite athlete. If you're just a normal person, you can put on the shoes, wear the swimsuit, and it'll make absolutely no difference at all.
Absolutely. I just love it though when they start saying that they're going to include space tech in a swimsuit. They're going to be swimming when they find water on Mars later or something. Like, think of I don't know. It's just odd. Let's put it that way.
It's odd, but it shows you how technologically advanced we are and the benefits it can bring if you're an elite athlete.
Absolutely. Alrighty, let's move on to our last topic. We haven't spoken about COVID for a little while, and I just thought I'd bring this up because of long COVID being a thing that was obviously identified, relatively early on in the piece. Is still a thing for some people. And obviously, COVID's come to mind recently for me only because I'm starting to hear... it's like anything, it goes through waves, and then you start hearing more people have caught it. Of late, I've personally heard that there's been quite a few more people that have caught it, but it comes back to this idea of what is COVID doing to the body, etc. And I know that there's research that's continually ongoing, and hopefully we'll have more answers as years go on, because this is kind of painstaking, slow work to try and determine how a brand new virus, at least for us, how is it interacting with us, with our bodies, etc. This particular story about how doing full body scans and seeing the long-term effects of COVID on the body was quite, seemingly alarming from what I saw in there. Obviously, it's about certain types of people and their reactions. The immune response probably overkicking itself maybe and trying to deal with COVID. And and it's just a further highlight again of just how in a way bizarre the illness is in terms of its effects. Like, it's not like like the cold or flu where we all pretty much have the same reaction, normally speaking. And it's just a very strange illness, and hopefully we get a lot more definitive information and knowledge from the research that's being done at the moment on this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, the immune system is a finely balanced system, and it's there protecting us every day. And if we didn't have an immune system, we'd probably be dead within a couple of days. The slightest infection or disease would just take us out. So it's very important. And obviously with COVID and long COVID, I guess what it is, I don't think it's actually COVID over a long period. It's an autoimmune disease or an immune dysfunction that's created by the initial COVID infection. And obviously there's something going on there in some people who are predisposed to it. And it just maintains that inflammatory response from the immune system. And that manifests itself in a lot of serious ways for some individuals. I mean, I think we should emphasize here that for most people, long COVID and the debilitating effects of long COVID are just simply not an issue. But if you're predisposed to it, this can be a very serious matter. And I would suspect that there's a significant proportion of the population, and maybe this is just a condition that's been highlighted by COVID, but a lot of other people put up with this as well, I think triggered through other illnesses. So it's quite serious, and it's amazing to think that we hadn't heard of COVID now even 5 years ago, and yet it's changed pretty much just about everything in our world.
It's funny you mentioned that sort of time frame, because in reading this particular story, I went back in time just to recap just some of the news articles that came out during 2020, and just how strange a time we all had, particularly March 2020. Just reading some of the news articles from back then. I also went back through and had a look at some of the news clips and articles that were running during Melbourne's lockdowns in particular, and just having flashbacks to nobody being on the street, and basically me being the only one working in the office the whole, like, for months on end, which was bizarre because the office is usually full. And obviously there was a whole lot of things going wrong for people who were getting infected with COVID, etc. as well, which wasn't good. And it was just a completely bizarre time. And I think the thing that just to tie the two things together, is that COVID's still here, even though I think the majority of us want it far in the rear view mirror.
Definitely. It's still here, and we know there's other waves coming back. So let's hope it never gets back to the serious levels that we've seen in the past, and let's hope that the variants don't become more, I guess, threatening to our population health. And let's hope we can manage it, and let's hope we can find cures for long COVID. But it's tough all round. I think what COVID showed everyone globally is that we don't really know everything about these types of diseases. We've been lucky, I guess, with the flu, that typically the flu doesn't create a pandemic. But, I think we're a lot wiser now to how lucky we probably have been over the years, and that these threats exist.
Absolutely. All right, Steve, I might wrap it up there. Hybrid cars. No, EVs, no. Maybe I'll just get a scooter. Maybe we'll keep it at that. That's very Melbourne, so I might have to go full scooter.
An electric scooter would suit a guy like you, Ben.
Absolutely, and I can keep it on my balcony and not even pay for a car park. Put it that way.
Oh, I love it. That's the way to go.
Absolutely. All right, so that's it for this week's episode. We'll catch you next time.